What is up, everybody, and welcome back to Talkin Wellness, presented by South Florida Wellness Network. My name is Christian.
This is your boy Michael. How are we doing, guys?
And welcome back. We have another exciting episode after being gone for 2 weeks.
Chris left us. He went on vacation.
Yeah, as you can see, I got married.
Congrats.
Thank you.
Congrats.
Thank you
Sorry.
so much. Well, thank you. Thank you
Don't
very
have to
much.
tell him that. No, I'm kidding.
Now, we are
No,
back.
for sure.
We took a brief 2-week break. For you guys, it'll be about 3 weeks, if I'm not mistaken, for the podcast scheduling. Because this episode, we're recording it on the 28th. You guys will be seeing it on the 5th of July, if I'm not mistaken. So for you guys, it'll be 3 weeks, but for us, it'll be 2 weeks. But we really wanted to make this episode because we are talking about a very important topic, and it kind of ends. This is the last weekend that we can talk about this, so we really wanted to take the opportunity to talk about PTSD awareness, right? So we thought it was really interesting. And I'll introduce our two guests for today, but or I guess I'll let them introduce themselves. But it's PTSD Awareness Month in June, right? Bringing awareness to that. But there's a community that's heavily impacted by PTSD, as you guys might have remembered from our episode with Brian Sims, who came over and talked a little bit about that. If you haven't checked that out, please do. It was a wonderful episode. But it's also Independence Day is coming up, right? So we thought that what a great opportunity to just kind of merge those two by having veterans come and talk about PTSD and their experience with mental health and the community that they work with, because these both gentlemen also work with community, specifically with veterans. So I'm going to give you both the opportunity to introduce yourselves and what you do, and then we'll start having a cool discussion about PTSD. So whichever one of you wants to start.
My name is Leo Bingham. I work for Goodman Jewish Family Services in Broward County in their Supportive Services for Veterans Families program as an outreach and eligibility specialist. I am a veteran of the Army Infantry. I did just under 6 years. And been working in SSVF, Supportive Services for Veterans Families with homeless veterans for almost 4 years now.
That's awesome.
And I'm Sean MacPhee, working for Mission United, which is an initiative that started by United Way here in Broward County. I'm a 24-year veteran of the Navy, and I've been working in this particular field for going on about 6 years now. Since I've been Mission United coming up about 4 or 5 months.
That's awesome. Well, thank you both for coming. I really appreciate you both being
Thanks
here.
for having us.
We had some technical difficulties before we started, so they really pulled through, and I really appreciate the both of you being here. So we're getting into some serious conversations today, right? We're going to try to keep it a little bit lighthearted, because that's kind of how Michael and I do things. But we are getting into very serious topics. So we do want to offer our listeners and our viewers a little bit of a warning. We are going to get into topics of suicide awareness. We're going to get into topics about homelessness. We're going to get into topics about trauma and what PTSD is. So if that might be a little bit intense for you, that is okay. You can always watch our this episode at a later time, maybe with some supportive people right next to you, and just know that we still care about you, even if you can't watch this episode. Okay, but we definitely want to have these conversations because it's important to bring awareness about this very sometimes sensitive and sometimes not so hard to talk about topic, which is trauma and PTSD, right? So I say we get straight into the conversation, right? So there's a lot of really interesting places that we can go to, but let's focus on what PTSD is, so we have an understanding on the conversation that we're about to have. So this is this website is the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs, and they use the DSM-5 definition of how to diagnose PTSD. PTSD, there's a couple criteria that fit into, and obviously is the DSM-5. Those who don't know, that's from the American Psychological Association. They use this book as their method of telling people what type of conditions they're experiencing, right? Like if they have depression, if they have anxiety. Psychologists use this book pretty on a regular basis, right? So this is a couple of the criteria. Number 1, the person was exposed to death, threatened death, actual or threatened serious injury, or actual threatened sexual violence in the following ways: direct exposure, witnessing the trauma, learning that the trauma happened to a close relative or a close friend, and indirect exposure to adverse details of the trauma, usually in the course of professional duties, such as, check this out, first responders, medics, and military personnel. The second criteria, or criteria B, is the traumatic event is persistent, re-experienced in the following ways: unwanted, upsetting memories, nightmares, flashbacks, emotional distress after exposure to traumatic reminders, or physical reactivity after exposure to traumatic reminders. And then in C, criterion C is avoidance of trauma-related stimuli after the trauma in the following ways: trauma-related thoughts or feelings, trauma-related reminders. Now, there's more to it, but I think that's a good spot to stop and just talk about what that means necessarily. So part of the reason why I also wanted to bring the both of you in is because I want to hear a little bit about your story and see if you've ever struggled with any of these emotions, because maybe it wasn't 100% PTSD, but these are common emotions that we see across veterans all over, right? So I'm curious to hear, what are your thoughts on this idea, maybe some of your experience, if you're willing to share.
Sure. Want me to go? Sure, I'll go first. So, getting a little personal here and everything else. I am 100% service connected with the VA for PTSD. It's you hear it a lot. Every day is a struggle and everything. For me, I'm a very, the way it affects me is very up and down and everything else. You get your peaks and valleys. But man, some of the, they say, kind of outweighs each other and everything. But, for me, it's like the valleys just are, it's hard to kind of put it into words and everything else. It's almost like, I've gotten to a point where I can see when it's, it's starting and everything. And I don't know, the best way I can describe it is it's almost like, it's you're watching like a, maybe like a accident train wreck and but you can't stop it, and everything, even though, it's where you can see where it's heading and everything. My own, I've gotten, it's actually fairly recently, it was late last year where I was actually able to make a, huge improvement and everything else. It was actually just before I started working on my current job and everything. But no, it was, obviously PTSD impacts everyone differently. We can get into, the kind of like the treatment and stuff that's available to it as well. I am getting, piggybacking off of, how it impacts everyone differently. What I found to help me out was maybe not, the most, it's kind of off the beaten path of what I found that
not
was able to help me. Not. Thank you. That's what the word I was looking for. But it's what I found that helped me actually start to process, unpack a lot of what had been, I don't know, weighing me down, so to speak, and everything else. But transitioning from the military was very, it was a pretty rough. I'm not gonna lie. I know I kind of feel like I'm rambling here and everything.
No, please.
That's what
this is for. Hey, this podcast is Talkin
There's
Wellness.
plenty of people that you might not believe it that are probably in your same shoes that probably need to hear the same story.
So if I get into like the treatment aspect of it, there's a few different main methods of treatment for it. CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. That's more of seeing what. I'm not a therapist. I'm just putting it out there. I'm not qualified. This is just based on my understanding of it and having done a bit of it and everything else. Cognitive behavioral therapy. What that's about is like you're gonna expose yourself to situations that are stressful, maybe triggering to you and everything else. You could be keeping a journal and everything else, and then you're working with a mental health professional as to unpacking exactly what it is that is causing that to be a triggering event for you and everything. I haven't done this one, but I've looked into it and it's been recommended to me. It's called ART, Accelerated Resolution Therapy, and that's more of looking into what your triggers are and what it is about them that when you ever see that, hear it, whatever it is that triggers it, what your mind has that attached to in your head that causes you to decline, get triggered
Yeah,
and
yeah,
everything
yeah,
else.
for sure.
It's essentially they're trying to make you associate whatever that is with something else other than, what it is that triggers you from your
Interesting.
past.
Got you.
Okay.
Like I said, I haven't,
like
I haven't
retraining
done
your
any
brain a bit.
sessions of that yet, but as far as my understanding of it, that's kind of what it, what it entails and
Yeah.
everything.
Hey, we're all for giving resources here,
Yeah.
right? Whatever works for you, works for you, right?
For sure.
So thank you for sharing, Leo. I really, really appreciate it. Sean, I would love to hear from you too. Maybe some of those struggles that you've experienced in the past when you came back from the Navy and stuff like that.
Yeah, sometimes it's hard letting go because, I actually, with 24 years in the service, I saw a lot of stuff up close, doing humanitarian relief. I've gone toe-to-toe with some of our foreign navies. It's okay, I didn't realize I was sitting that far back. And, I've lost a lot of good sailors underneath my command over the years, and it was rough, So one of the things that for me was I joined a group called Mankind Project, and they use a lot of Native American Indian type techniques of seeking oneself out. It wasn't a group for, hey, let's tell you how to fix yourself. It was a safe space to be yourself.
I love that.
But there was no shame. There was no, hey, whatever it was, whatever, because we were a whole bunch of different groups of individuals with some with drug addiction, some with sexual abuse issue. It was a safe space where men could be men without fear, or those that we are accepting of those that think of themselves in a male view. We're very open to that. So using a lot of different techniques that I found all the way were able to even help me in my current job on how to approach people and how to talk to people to de-escalate. It was a great open space where I could share those things without fear of anybody looking at me going, you do what? And you cried? No. And then, of course, I have a very supportive family as well. So, and then, a lot of, great people I've met along the way, just by sharing and what they've done, it makes things much easier.
Yeah, we talk about it here all the time, the importance of support and like how crucial that is to your, not only your, when you're struggling with substance use, but when you're struggling with mental health too. Like that support could be the thing that changes your life forever, right? We've had people come on this podcast, share their stories and their stories of recovery, and like literally every single one of them at some point shared somebody came and gave me a helping hand and gave me some support.
As much
when
as
I
we
really
like to
needed
think
it.
of ourselves as superheroes of humans, sometimes, like he said, almost every time we saw when someone changed their lives, it came with a huge level of support from someone, whether they knew them personally or someone that came randomly in their life and impacted them, whether they be someone that's doing the kind of work that we're doing, or someone that's doing stuff that you guys do to help former vets. So it's just, you need support in your life, and you just don't really know where it's going to come from sometimes. And that's why you got to also be open to that support.
Absolutely, yeah. So actually, I'm glad that we're talking about this because it leads a little bit into my next question. You mentioned a little bit there, a big part of PTSD based on kind of what media and what I've learned from other conversations with other veterans is that a big part of that trauma comes from the experience of loss of fellow friends, fellow coworkers, fellow team members, whatever you want to call it. So I'm very curious to hear today, now that you're in this road to kind of getting better and you're starting to utilize these strategies to get well and then teach those strategies to other people, how do you, as a veteran who has experienced these emotions, how do you deal with loss in the midst of it happening or after it happened?
I could go with that one. It's always a tough thing to deal with loss, especially those that you've served with or served alongside too. Is the good thing is always trying to remember the good times, even though you've been in some tight spots, and just remember that all those times you supported each other. It will always be rough. I mean, I keep definitely a lot of the photo albums and a lot of those individuals that I've lost along the way, and I still reach out to their families from time to time. Those ones I'm super close with, checking up on them, even though they may not know I'm checking up on them, but I scan the social medias and stuff and just see how they're doing and, how things are changing in their lives, and hopefully, be there when they need me.
Awesome. What about you, Leo? What do you think?
This might be a little lengthy. I promise I will.
Yeah.
Please.
I will tie it. I promise I will.
I
tie
love
it
this.
into
Let's
this
do it.
and everything else. Just keep that in mind. Okay? I promise I will get there.
Okay.
So in the military, like when you have barracks and stuff like that on post and everything, those, like I'm in the Army, so where the soldiers sleep and everything, like the front desk there, they have to be manned 24/7. And it's called close quarters, CQ. And it's like you have CQ duty. It's a 24-hour shift straight. You and one other person, you get there for 24 hours. You can imagine you get to know them pretty well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And everything there. And when I first got to Fort Bragg, after I got out of airborne school and everything, I got my first CQ duty at the barracks there and everything. And the guy who I'm on duty with, I never met him before and everything. And I'm sure Sean can tell you, like when you're in the military and you meet someone else that's from like you're where you're from and stuff like that, you're like, oh, and I'm from Connecticut originally, and what I found is that no against any place else, but like it tends to be like it's not just people from Connecticut, like people from New England. We tend to be New England, and stuff like that. So yeah, the guy who I'd never met him before, he comes there on CQ. We kind of bonded immediately because he's also from New England. I went to college in Boston and everything, and he played hockey for UMass Boston and everything. So we learned about it. And my name's Leo. He's like, oh, my son's name is Leo. We were both young parents. He had a family and a couple of kids and stuff like that. So you bond over that, and 24-hour shift and everything. Talk about a whole load of stuff and everything. But that passed. It's like, hey man, this Mike, he's really cool, and everything. And a few weeks later, you hear, because it's a small knit community where I was and when I was going through the training and everything, they're like, we're talking amongst ourselves, and you hear, some of the guys are talking, hey, someone that we're in training with, he was in that movie Miracle, by Disney with Kurt Russell about the 1980 USSR hockey game and everything, and everyone was like. And we're like, oh, really? I hadn't seen the movie at that point and everything. But it was like, oh, really? Oh, okay. I guess I'll keep an eye. It's one of those weird things. You get to know, like, someone, this actor's trying to be, now he's on the road to becoming, a Green Beret and everything. So I remember if a little bit more time passed. I promise I'm getting to the point.
You're good.
I told you it's going to be a little winding here.
Go.
No, you're good, brother. You're good.
So
I love
a little bit of time had passed, and I come to find out because I looked it up, and I was like, who is this that was in the movie? It was 24 hours with this shift, and the guy never mentioned it once. He used to be an actor, and stuff like that, because he didn't want to get. I'm gonna watch my mouth and stuff like that, but the cadre, the people who run, or like the you would think of them in, like, if you were at a college, the faculty, if you want to put it in civilian terms and everything. They would, if they found out that someone was an actor and stuff like that, they would just be putting the screws to him and everything.
Messing with him and
obviously
whatnot.
He didn't want that, but he was just the most humble guy. That's I got to know him and he's been pretty well and stuff like that. Nice guy whenever we would see each other and stuff like that and training. Oh yeah, that's Mike. What you can call first names there, Michael Mantenuto and everything. And got to know him really well because he eventually did. They all did find out. Yeah, this is him and everything.
They always find out, don't they?
And everything. And of course, they're. And I saw it. Unfortunately, they put the screws to him. They kind of focused in on him and everything else. And he had, some issues that caused him to where he had to withdraw from the Special Forces qualification course that we were in at the time. But he eventually he went to the regular Army, but he came back. And he made it through. He got his Green Beret, his Special Forces tab. Went off to First Special Forces Group, which is right over in Fort Lewis, Washington, and their AO area of operation is Asia. I promise I'm getting to the point. I know I'm getting. I promise. I know. It's funny. We got this moment of levity. I'm sorry. I'm about to hit you with a gut punch here and everything. But
hey, it's part of it. We
I
need
guess
to
you
talk
kind of
about
figured
this.
that it was coming and everything. But so yeah, great guy. Got to know him. Most humble dude you ever known. And everything. And the guy that I knew loved his family so much. Loved his son. You recognize that in another father and everything.
Yeah.
And but in 2017 he killed himself.
Yeah.
And you know, because he had been an actor and stuff like that, you see a few websites and stuff like that pick it up. You know, former Disney actor, Green Beret commits suicide and everything else, and then you got the Daily Mail. They got pictures of him because he shot himself in his vehicle and everything, and they're posting pictures of the vehicle with his blood in it and everything. And but I guess getting back to the point and everything, when I think of when I think of him, and everything, I do my best to, I don't think of where he ended up, but I think of Mike. There's this great shot of him in that because obviously I watch Miracle now. I try to make it like every Memorial Day and stuff like that. But he's got this one scene alone with Kurt Russell in the movie and everything, and it ends with him. He's got this big old smile on his face and everything else. And whenever I think back to him and everything, think back to Mike, that's the image that I have of him, is him with that big smile on his face.
Awesome.
Yeah.
But it doesn't. It's not like I'm forgetting about what ended up and what happened and everything. But getting back to the point that I started with, when I as far as coping and stuff like that. That's how. That's what I try to do. Is that
focus on more the positives as opposed to the negatives.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I do that with the other guys that I served with that either died overseas or I think I told you before we started this. I've had I think more guys I've served with have committed suicide than have died.
Yeah.
Overseas and stuff like that.
That's wild, man.
I think we as humans, it's very easy to find a lot of reasons to not like someone, but if you flip that, it can be very easy to find a lot of reasons to also like someone. So I think it's all about perspective, and that's what it really is.
And it goes to yourself
and you guys
too.
both mentioned that, it's about shifting that perspective, and instead of thinking of him as like that person, I'm thinking of him on the good side, and that's really what life is about,
Yeah, and I guess that leads perfectly into the next topic that I really wanted to hit on. We talked briefly before the podcast. What are some topics that we really want to get into? And one of them that we see a lot for a lot of people who struggle with PTSD is the suicide rate. It's really high. I remember, again, and I'm probably going to keep referencing back to the Brian Sims episode because he gave a lot of really good information that I really recommend you guys to check out. But one of the things that we specifically were talking about, I remember clear as day, was how high that number is. Now, sadly, I don't remember the specific number, and I
What is it,
The
apologize.
number that
22 a
gets thrown out there is 22 a day,
Yeah.
and
There you go.
Where I've spoken to some guys, you get your pedantics.
Yeah,
that are like,
the
oh, actually, if
21
you calculate, it's
point
not
whatever.
that, but it's still
But
frighteningly
It's a
high.
staggering
Yeah.
number.
But
Yeah.
one point that he said that it like rings in my head like a bell. One is too many.
Yeah, of course.
And that when he look, I got chills right now. Like I remember when he said those words, and it rung because any person that decides to take their life is one too many. You know what I'm saying? It's like, and it really it changes the perspective. And obviously I'm not here to like praise anything or give flowers or anything, but it does change my perspective for a lot of people that come back home, a lot of veterans who come back home and now they have to deal with this emotion, this trauma, because it's not easy. And it hurts to a degree that a lot of them choose this is the way out, right? So where I'm trying to go is like, how can we, by having these conversations, by doing the work that you guys do, how can we instill and inspire people to choose another way, right? And I guess that directly leads into the third point that I wanted to hit on, which is I think that a lot of people who choose this route is because they feel they have no other choices or they have no other way out, right? We were talking a little bit, Sean, beforehand about when you're lacking resources, it's like you're in a tunnel, right? And it's like there's no way out of a dark tunnel, right? But then that resource pops up and boom, light at the end of the tunnel. You start walking towards that. Still dark, but you have hope now, right? So I'm very curious to hear from your guys' perspective that you work with a lot of people in the community who have these feelings that we're talking about, these feelings that you yourself share, right? So what do you I guess the question that I'm trying to ask is like, what do you recommend to those people who are mainly veterans, or maybe people in general who are just feeling PTSD? Because PTSD doesn't only affect veterans. We're talking about veterans, but it affects a huge amount of people who are not also part of the forces. So a great question that I want to ask you then is, what are some resources that you would recommend for people who are struggling with these intense emotions so they can hopefully find some light in that tunnel?
Well, mine obviously, would be what I mentioned before, getting with a mental health care professional. You can look into the various forms of therapy that are, available to you and everything. I think I said it before, and I'm sure I'll keep prefacing it and everything. I am not a mental health care professional. I can't tell you this is what works and stuff like that. I can tell you from my own, perspective and what has helped me out. And like I said, it's a bit, unconventional and stuff like that. But if I was going to refer, I wouldn't recommend the route that I went. But I would always recommend go see a mental health professional, and see what therapy is available for you and everything else. Me and my get into my role and stuff like that when I'm out in the community and everything else. I know now. Obviously, the main concern is with housing and everything. If someone's unhoused, that's obviously the main concern, and especially with our organization, that is the number one priority. But what I do is, as I've become more, been able to process a lot of my own issues and everything. I found that I can recognize it and see in other people, a lot better.
Similar
now.
Struggles.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so I found that what I'm doing a lot lately when I do encounter someone that I see is having that inner battle and everything is I'm always working to facilitate them and let them know what's available. I was like,
Do you find yourself more drawn to people like that like have those similar struggles? That are like, do you see like a bit of, not bit of yourself, but do you see like, I was going through that at one point, I feel a little bit more passionate.
I recognize.
To give that
I
help.
recognize the. I can see them where they, I don't want to get to in these I don't know, these stereotypical stuff, but you can see it in their eyes and stuff like that, and how but yeah, like I said, I recognize that in them and everything, and I realize that that's the thing I have to keep telling myself in my role and everything. I know, because it was one of like the bit of a tangent here, but when I was first getting interviewed for this, I remember our CEO, she, like, one of the questions she threw out was like, oh, like what superpower would you want if you could have it and stuff like that. She's like, most people say, oh, I'd be Superman. And my thing is like, if that was me, I would feel immense guilt because you can't save everyone. That's how I feel.
Yeah.
But I have to tell myself that when I'm out there and I recognize that I'm interacting with a lot of the homeless veterans and everything, is I can let them know what's available to them and everything. But just like you can't save everyone. You can't. They have to be ready for it, and that's the one. And it more than anything else. Like I know you heard me mention it. Like it was just fairly recently, like late last year, where I made a huge improvement. And I realized that a big part of that was that I was ready to. And it wasn't, that's something that I think kind of gets lost in it, because, even when we're, you guys are great and everything, PTSD awareness and everything else, getting the resource out there, the info and everything. But, at the same time, you have to realize that, a huge component of it is someone really has to be, they have to be ready to.
Yeah,
to
it's the
do
personal
and address it.
responsibility
Yeah.
within oneself
Yeah.
to
And
accept that.
Yeah, I think that was looking back on it, that was the number one thing of when, what was it that caused me to have that I was finally ready to. Like I said, that's just from my perspective and everything. I want to put that disclaimer out there and everything. I am not a mental health professional, but that's just from my experience.
Yeah, but we even talk about it here all the time. We believe in the 5 core concepts of wellness and recovery are HPRESS: hope, personal responsibility, education, support, and self-advocacy. Right? It's that first step, that personal responsibility, And and we talk about all the time that it's wonderful how they all kind of work together, right?
Yeah.
Like that, taking that step of personal responsibility can give you hope, right? That hope can be found in the support that you find, right? That support can teach you ways how to self-advocate.
Yeah.
And all of this is encompassed under education. Learning about yourself, learning about why you're reacting the way you're reacting, why you're feeling this way, and moreover, how to find the help that I need, right? I love that you mentioned that because it is responsibility. That's the scary part, isn't it? That's the fear.
Yeah.
Taking that first step and actually deciding to do something about it, right? So that's why this is happening, right? Because we're trying to inspire people to take that step, right? Sean, I'm very curious to hear from your perspective too, based on everything that we're talking about, the idea of lack of resources and homelessness and suicide awareness and loss.
I wouldn't say
this.
it's necessarily lack of resource. It's lack of information getting to those individuals needed. Now, like
Yes.
here in Broward, we use Broward 211. It's your helpline. Call 211 if you don't know. Somebody will pick up the phone, tell them what's going on, and they'll be able to direct you to. I mean, we have Broward Health. We have Operation Sacred Trust is out there. We got Henderson.
Operation Sacred Trust is no longer out.
Oh, that's right. That's right. I forgot.
I used to work there.
Sorry, I forgot. They changed.
It's all right.
Yeah, they weren't what they used to be. But there's definitely quite a few organizations that are there to help. It's getting that information, especially for individuals. Look at our movies. Look at our commercials. Army of One. We're bred that we are steel. We are iron. We can we run toward the fight. And when you're done, you still have that mentality when you get out. And it's a hard vulnerability for someone to let somebody else. I'm carrying the load so you don't have to. It's my job to make sure that you get home safe. But I'm not worried about me. I'm worried about you. And then when it comes, it's also for not only just the veteran or military member to recognize it in themselves, it's for the family members to do that training to recognize those things. That I believe that's one of those things we should talk about as they're exiting military service, how to recognize in your partner, your spouse, your brother, to recognize when they're in that space and how to get them, because you got to be careful, especially when it comes to something like this. You may think you're doing well, but you might actually be triggering them in that space, making things worse. But it is, but we just have to be supportive and take those steps, like, doing those trainings and understanding what it is, especially if you live with somebody who's a first responder or veteran. Somebody needs to be ready for that. Somebody needs to go, when do I see that turn in that individual, to make sure that we're there for them when they need us?
Yeah. And another thing, providing resources for the families.
Yes.
As well. Because at least I've always had this belief, and maybe, I don't know if people agree with me, but I always felt that the soldiers are the veterans, but the families also have to deal with those struggles as well, because they're there with them, right?
That's why we have organizations like ours that we don't just help, we help the veteran family as well.
Exactly. It's such a crucial thing, because nobody, in my personal life, there's a couple of familial things going on at the moment, and it's weird because nobody really understands the purpose and the power of family until something happens where that is put to the test, and I see it right now in my life, right? There's some struggles going on, and now it's affecting all of us. So I can't even begin to imagine what it is for when a veteran comes home and they have to now start living this new life, essentially, where everything is different. Nothing is the same. And they're supposed to be all right, back to normal, switch. No, right? And the family gets to see that. So I would love to hear your perspective a little bit. Obviously, if you don't want to share too much in detail, that's completely fine. But I would love to hear, how was that transition when you came home with your family? How was that experience? Obviously, if you don't want to get into many specifics, that's okay. I know I said it already, but I really want to make sure that you guys are comfortable. But if you're willing to share a little bit how that experience was, I would love to hear that.
All right, I got it.
Yeah.
So I used to either say in the military somebody really, really didn't like me or really, really hated me, because I had a hard time staying in one tour in one place because I was constantly being deployed. Matter of fact, my last sea rotation of 4 years, I deployed 3 times back-to-back on 3 different sea commands.
Wow.
Because in my job as an enlisted navigator I'm actually what they call a red line. The ship cannot get underway without me. somebody of my rank and my pay grade has to be on
Got it.
board.
Okay.
No brag, just fact.
Yeah, just fact. So whether it's be me or somebody else, so it just, I guess I was in the right place at the right time. As soon as I got deployed, I came back, deployed again, came back, deployed, came back. Coming back is can be quite difficult. 'Cause, for me particularly, when I deploy, I turn a switch off. The only thing I do is I focus 100% of my time on my work. I don't even think about
Interesting.
back home. It's an emotional switch that I turn off, and it's very hard to turn back on when I get back, is because I'm used to it. I'm gone. Or in my early days, in the early 90s, communication isn't what it used to be. I mean, we used to make a laugh about it. I used to remember calling home using a ham radio because we bounced off a ham radio. Hello, honey, I love you, over. And then there would be an echo. And then the ham operator would switch over and allow her to teach back. Snail mail. I mean, there was no internet where I was. If you wanted to call home, it cost you $300 for one phone call calling home from international because you're trying to catch everything up because you have no idea when you're going to pull in port again.
Yeah.
Communications is very rough. I mean, that where you write letters to each other before you deploy and you just open them up as you go. Day one, day two, because you have no idea if you send mail as you're moving, because sometimes when you're particularly in the Navy, when you're going to port and you're off to go to the next station, I can't tell you a number of times we were diverted to a different port we weren't expected to be in because operational commitment changed, or we had an engine failure, we needed a repair, and the only place we could go is here. You got mail that I can tell you back early in my career, I got mail that showed up, from like 6 weeks ago, and I got the letter that got sent after that because the mail was chasing us around the Mediterranean trying to catch up with us because we kept diverting ports.
Wow.
So, and then coming back and trying to become emotional, especially when you have children and a spouse, is trying to turn that back on and not trying to be distant. And, your spouse is trying to understand, why are you so distant? Why are you sitting on the other side of the room? Because you're trying to get that emotional engine start up again because you had to turn off. It's the only way, because it's the only way I could survive being in where I was doing my day-to-day job, because I had to turn it off. All I could focus is all my energy on my job and my crew, because if not, I couldn't get the job done. So, and then coming back, trying to get back, sometimes it takes a little while to get back into that. So.
Yeah, obviously, it's interesting that you mentioned that because I've never been in the active forces, so I have media to depend on to see how it works or whatever when they're truthful, right?
That,
Right.
Yeah.
But I'll never forget when I was little, there was the first Transformers movie. I don't know if you ever saw it, but
When you were little, the first Transformers movie.
well,
Wow, that was so long.
yeah.
Made me feel old.
Yeah, sorry, but I'll
back
never
in
forget one
2000s.
specific scene that always tugged in my heartstrings, even as a little kid. There's I forgot his name, but the actor is talking to his wife who just had a baby through the internet, and all hell breaks loose in wherever they're at, and the signal just starts like fading. And then boom, into the action. He has to grab his gun and start fighting. And that specific image has always stayed with me because it's like a reminder of like how serious it is, right? Where anything can happen at any moment, and you need to go, and that's it. So it's interesting that you mentioned that emotional switch, because at least obviously we've talked about many times here how movies can sometimes go to very large
I'd like
extremes.
to ask that question, 'cause it
which we
seems like
can
you
we
guys
can
have
talk about that right now.
kind of-
But
What?
that specific part always got to me,
Yeah.
like especially that emotional toll that it can take, right? So that's why I like to ask these type of questions, like how was your experience? And now we go to you, Leo. How was your experience coming back home after you came back?
From deploying or when I got out of the military?
Well, I guess we can kind of go both ways,
Yeah, mine was I guess if you want to talk about family and everything else, mine's I guess may be useful for other people to hear this who may be in a similar situation that I was when I was in, because unfortunately I did not have the best, if any, family support in there. I didn't have I was a father, as a young father and everything, but this is a whole other issue and stuff like that. But me and my wife, my mother, and my child, we had separated due to her issues and everything else. But so I never, it's not like I had, that even in like, when I was at basic training, you don't have your phone. The only thing that you can have is letters. It's letter writing. It's like,
Yeah, you didn't have that
old-fashioned and
conventional home
everything.
setting to come back
Yeah,
to.
yeah,
Gotcha.
and I remember like everyone would get so many freaking letters. I would get none. And coming back from deployment and stuff like that. It's a whole ceremony when you get back to base. They line you up in formation. It's a whole big dog and pony show. Everyone's family's all there, and in formation, and then they cut you loose, and that's the first time you get to see all your family and stuff. Everyone's family's running out, and I didn't have anyone. I'm not saying that for like a pity part.
Yeah.
Just
Saying as fact.
But
yeah,
that's
what it
important to
was.
talk
and
about.
because there might be other people in similar situations. Mine, coming back from the point, but it's funny. I tell people that because of the situation of how volatile my personal life was, like just before I deployed, because separated from my wife, and unfortunately she was doing things that were endangering the kids and everything, and my son was with her for that time, and I was like, I'm gonna, not only that, I'm gonna deploy. My son's with, I don't know what she's doing. She's being dangerous, but thankfully, my son was able to, I got him in a much better place, got away from her, and thankfully my mom came in and she took him, and so with a lot of people are like, oh, how did you feel when you were going off to deployment? Were you scary? For me, it was like my son was I was fine. Like it was actually like I was more relaxed than I had been and everything, and for me, like he was my family. That's what was gonna get me back.
Yeah.
When I was over in Kandahar and deployed and everything, I would run every chance I get, I'd go and run like a mile to and from the USO tent just to talk. He was probably about 3 years old at the time. Even if it was just for like 30 seconds at like 2 a.m. my time, going there just to even if he's like he's 3 years old, doesn't want to talk, and that's fine, that's fine, just talking to him, and then I'd run back and everything.
Holding that space.
So that's what going back to the family aspect of it, that's what got me through it and everything.
Nice.
But as far as even when I got out of the military, I got out at the end of 2015, and that's when I moved on here. I'm not a Florida native. I'm a transplant. But
neither am I.
I am adopted, though. I did stay here for Hurricane Irma. I didn't retreat, so that makes me an adopted Floridian.
There
So
you go.
that's how it
There
works.
you go.
But no, it's so I came down here. I had my oldest sister. She was down here, and getting off on a tangent here, but I'm talking about getting back to civilian life and everything. So not only was I leaving the military, but I was also at that point, because I had gotten divorced from my my wife, my son's mother, and I got full custody of my son in the divorce, thankfully. And so I'm not only am I leaving the military, and you're leaving what's very familiar to you, your structure-wise and everything. I all of a sudden I'm moving to a new state. I've got full custody of my son. I don't know what I'm going to be doing for work. So you can imagine how it gets stressful.
Yeah,
that would be.
absolutely.
So it was rough, and then you get, and it's very, when I was gone out, in 2015, the Army, and I think, across the board, all the branches, they have, it's gotten better to where they have specific, training that they give, people that are about to get out, as far as, acclimating back to civilian life, whether it's, helping them, this is how, applying for jobs and stuff like that, these and everything. But they put forth an effort to try and help you get acclimated back to civilian life. But it's still
It's so funny. It almost sounds, not to like compare the two, but it almost sounds like prison reformment. Like when I hear like people talking about coming out of prison
Ouch.
and coming back into real life, it's
yeah,
like they have a lot of
I can
levels
see
of
that
reformment.
because there's a lot of it's structured. In a lot of ways,
Exactly, the structure,
you're not
yeah.
in charge of a lot of you don't have a lot of freedom and everything else. If you guys, I can tell you, that's something that maybe like people haven't served, like don't really understand, is that like when I was you get some young 18, 19-year-old kid who goes out, drinking on the weekend, gets arrested for a DUI. Guess what? The whole company's coming back at 02 in the morning on Sunday, and you're staying there.
Yeah.
and yes, you are all getting chewed out for this 18-year-old kid.
Yep, been there.
Yep.
It's a unit.
Yeah.
a
One
unit.
steel, like you said.
So like I said, it's stuff like that. If you're, I was infantry, so if you go out to the field and you're training, if you lose any piece of equipment, with nods, or night vision, anything that is left out there, you're not coming back. You're until it's found. How long is it going to take? You got to stay out there a week, a few days, stuff like that. If you got families at home, they're waiting on you.
Yeah.
Tough.
Tough.
You are government property, pretty much,
Yeah.
But
Wow.
so yeah, it's from every aspect of there. You don't realize
It's like a life shock.
Yeah, it was
Legit shock.
it was good. I
Yeah,
had an officer tell me, and I still live. It was good. He told me early on because I always had it in my head. He was like, look, the Army and the military in general will control as much of your life as you allow it to.
Yep.
It's something that I always kept in
Hey,
mind.
I'd say the government in general wants everybody, but
No,
I absolutely agree
that
for
is-
sure.
That
yeah.
is awesome perspective, and
Yeah.
I appreciate you both sharing because that is. See, I'd never heard of that before. That's why I love having this podcast, man.
I have a question. Okay, so back to like the movie thing.
Yeah, that was
Along
gonna be
with
my next
that,
question.
Yeah.
As far as misconceptions or things like that, what's like something as biggest misconception as far as movies or things that you've heard? What's something that's extremely bothered you in this personal space?
I can
Yeah.
tell you what's irritating. It's not
Yeah,
necessarily
yeah.
that
I
bothers
wanna-
me.
yeah.
Okay, the first thing that is drilled into you when you get into basic training and stuff like that is always not a number. Okay, so you hear these people say, "Yeah, I'll see at 0800 and stuff like." No, that is not.
Okay, there you go. That's
0800.
interesting.
It's
Yeah.
never
Okay.
anything like that.
Okay, there you go.
When you're talking over comms and stuff like that, you'll hear them say, "All right, over and out." No,
No.
it's either over or it's out. So it's never
okay,
over
there you
and
go.
out. Those are two different things.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
It's interesting that we're talking about this because we talked about it also with Brian Sims,
Yeah.
and that's where this question came about because you see it all the times in movies, like these people like doing these most superhero like things, and you're like,
Yeah.
whoa, that's a lot. But specifically media. And I'm interested to hear your perspective on this specifically because recently I was watching this guy on TikTok specifically.
Oh, boy.
I don't know if he's active or if he's a veteran. I've never been able to like figure that out, but he apparently is a soldier, and he makes these funny videos comparing all the branches, how would each branch react to
That's as old as time.
Right.
Yeah.
but he does it now on TikTok because that's making jokes modern, right?
Yeah.
But one thing that I've always found interesting is the way he portrays the Marines, where he portrays them as these like vicious, like screaming at your face kind of people, right? The reason
was he a Marine? I just want to.
I don't know, maybe.
Oh, okay.
I genuinely don't know. I need to
Okay,
look
okay.
more into his TikTok, right? And he would joke about the Coast Guard. We talked about the Coast Guard jokes. He would joke about the Navy, how they supposedly have it easy, and then the Air Force, where they have it even easier. So I'm very curious to hear, based on your perspective and your experience, because you both are from different branches. I'm curious to hear, how does that affect your psyche when you're actively working in the force?
Oh, I mean, when it comes to media and movies and stuff like that, even we just laugh it off because, most of the time they don't get it right or they only, tell you part of the story. I won't confirm or deny that some of the commands I've been on have been in the media for different reasons.
Of course, yeah.
And of course, they exaggerated, and we kind of just sat around and laughed, go, that's not exactly how the way it happened.
Right.
They sensationalize. They got to make the news.
Dramatize it, yeah.
That's right. So,
Have you ever seen a film where you feel they did get it right? You feel like, yes,
What's
they
the closest
they
depiction?
understood.
That's a good question.
They talked to somebody and they made it right.
Well, not one that's dramatized, but obviously you can look at your documentaries and stuff like that.
Of
like,
course, yeah.
Was it Restrepo? I believe it's what it's called.
Okay.
Based on the book called War and stuff like that, but the movie is called Restrepo. That's I remember the only reason that comes to mind is that I remember going to see it while I was going through airborne school while I was actually in. Granted, I hadn't deployed yet or anything like that, but even, my short time, less than a year in the military, I was like, oh, okay, this is, it's a documentary and stuff like that, but, it gives you a good idea, especially of some of the, I guess, maybe drawbacks of being in the military, too, and everything else.
Awesome. So Hello, Ed. Welcome. We had some technical difficulties, so we decided to do a quick switcheroo. This is Ed. You guys might have remembered Ed from our Men's Mental Health Awareness episode, which was very lovely. But Ed, we definitely want to bring you on because you helped me find these two wonderful guests for the podcast. So we definitely wanted to give you the props that you deserve. But we're talking about movies, and we're talking about how unrealistic sometimes they can be. But I wanted to bring up this perspective because we started talking a little bit, and I think it fits to what we're talking about. So there's a show, very popular show back in 2017, 2019 era, called The Punisher on Netflix. Marvel show, back when Marvel was trying to make more grittier content with their whole Netflix thing and whatever. But there was the show The Punisher. And if you know anything about The Punisher, is that one of the things that he struggles with is PTSD. And so did one of his fellow soldiers that we see in the show. Now, there's a specific scene where this soldier comes back home and he's having trouble sleeping. So one of the things that he does is he grabs a shovel and he digs a foxhole in the back of his house. And thank you for teaching me the term. And he lays in it to sleep. And it helps him sleep better. So this is something that I didn't have the chance to ask Brian, so I definitely want to ask you guys. Do you think that there's some things out there that it kind of goes into the conversation of like, do you feel that there's a movie out there that gets it right? It is kind of the same thing. Do you think that there's some of those little like tiny details about life after the military that kind of just stay with you? And you feel that it's just it's just a normal part of your life now, like maybe waking up really early or like different habits of sleeping or anything like that? And anything you guys want to share?
Well, I know for me, obviously, this is pretty personal and stuff like that. It'll change based on who you are and everything. But I'm pretty disciplined guy as far as like my schedule and everything else. Yes, I'm up. The sun's up every morning, still going to the gym and everything. And then I very much work. Getting home and stuff like that. I get home with my son. I take him to the gym. Help him out and everything else with it, whatever he needs. But for me, I was always like even before I got into the military, that's kind of how I was and everything. But like I said, it'll vary because not everyone that's in the military is disciplined. I'm sure Sean can tell you as well. You got plenty of guys who as soon as like that structure is kind of removed or becomes a little bit lax and everything, like if you're deployed, they're good, but as soon as you come back and everything that they're doing isn't monitored 24/7, they kind of fall by the wayside or fall apart and everything. But like for me, that's one thing that I definitely kept as a holdover from the military and stuff like that, is kind of like that structure and everything else. And for me, I realized that and when I'm having, I like I said, when you see that slow moving, train or car crash and stuff like that, I see it's coming on. That's where, a lot of times I can falter in everything else. And, for me, another thing going back to PTSD and everything is, realizing where, that discipline and that structure and, physical activity and everything, how that all fits into it. For me as well with mental health, so that's a big part of it as well.
Interesting. There
The
you go.
wellness plan.
You keep up with your wellness plan. Yeah, you keep up with your physical health, and guess what? Your mental health follows suit. Isn't that impressive, right? Sean, I would love to hear from you too. You share with me a story, and I really want you to share it with the viewers.
Oh, share the story again. So, I didn't find too many Navy type movies or even Coast Guard movies that are that accurate. But, there are bits and pieces from it. Even, let's talk about, like, Tom Hanks in Castaway, where after the movie, he was sitting there still flicking it because it's a repetition you're used to. So, in the Navy, it's not a cruise. I mean, we deal with weather. We deal with hurricanes. We deal, when a hurricane comes by, the first thing the ship does is, like, it's cheaper to put it to sea than leave it because, you beach a warship and you're talking about millions to $1 billion to pull that bad boy off and hope you didn't break anything. So, I mean, I'm used to, like, we sleep in what they call coffins. Our dresser is right below where we sleep. So there's 3 of us, most ships. They've done a lot better in the newer ships about making them more, but the ones I lay on my back. This is between me and the rack at top above me. So these ships rock. it's not like I got a seatbelt. It's
Right.
not like I can, bungee cord myself in. So
Right, yeah.
the only way to really sleep soundly was that here's my mattress, here's the bulkhead or wall, and I would wedge myself into that little corner, and I would just, until I felt tight enough, and that's how I would sleep. Well, unfortunately, one of the reasons why my wife and I, because people ask me why our beds are separated, like the I Love Lucy episode, is because when I come back from deployment, you're talking about many, many weeks at sea of it's not just calm, beautiful weather. I've been out there where it was storming for like 4 or 5 days, where you spent half your time walking down the hallway going this way and then this way. So when I come home, I'd wedge myself right up to her point that she would literally sometimes have to elbow me or punch me in the back to get me to move, because I was trying to find that comfort spot up to her. So now we had to move because, God forbid, because I still do it even now. I've been out since 2018 and I still do it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I sleep more comfortable in my office, which I have a single bed. I sleep better up against the wall than I do in my own regular bed because I got to make sure, because I'm so used to that security that I'm used to. And fortunately, still all these years, and also being a quartermaster, I was in charge of the time. So my last job in a cubicle, I asked them, like, hey, could you buy me a wall clock? And they're like, why do you need a wall clock in a cubicle? I said, because the ticking sound comforts me. As much as you believe it, the ticking sound,
Interesting.
Like a
the
white
ticking,
noise.
like tick, is actually a calming sound for me. I actually have, I actually listen to that sometimes when I'm having an anxiety attack. I'll find
Get a metronome for you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll find something that has a clock ticking. It's a comforting sound for me, because my job is to make sure that, because you got to remember, as a navigator, I'm in charge of the time. So as we're transiting to different time zones, I always have to make sure that every single ship on the entire ship is coordinated to make sure that we're all on the exact same time.
Interesting.
Because everything that we do in the military is time based.
Of course.
So that's the only way you can coordinate stuff. So I'm used to a ticking clock. It's actually a very soothing sound for me.
See, and we'll go ahead and we'll start closing off. But I just, I don't know if the audience is fully like understanding how I'm feeling right now. This is mind blowing to me. Like this is, and I'm not I'm not trying to like make you guys like so. All that I'm saying is that this kind of stuff really impresses me, because it's the kind of stuff that we don't hear often.
Oh yeah.
Right? And like I'm so happy that we're talking about this, because I've never heard of this before. These are real things that are happening, right? And now we know these things, and like if we have family members who struggle with these kind of things, we can hopefully learn to be a little more understanding, right?
Yeah.
Like there's somebody in my family, I won't say who it is just in case, because I didn't ask if they wanted their name out there, but somebody in my family has a background. They were armed forces. I forgot. I think he was special forces, if I'm not mistaken. He came back home, and like the one thing that kind of freaks him out more than anything else is loud noises.
Yep.
Like we'll be out in public and a balloon will pop. I saw it with my own eyes. It blew my mind. A balloon popped, and it was such a real reaction. And I've never, because you react to a balloon popping. Like if I clap in your face, of course you're gonna go, whoa. But his reaction was like his soul left his body and came back in 3 seconds.
Yeah.
So this kind of stuff really blows my mind, because it's real, and I guess that's really what it is. I'm more than anything, I'm impressed with reality, the reality that we don't get to talk about very often.
But that is one of the misconceptions of PTSD. They all think it's triggered by the same thing. They all think it's that loud noise. It could be anything. Because depending on which situation we're in, it could be something you're not even realizing that somebody that you're doing could trigger somebody, because depending on whichever it was, where they, I've dealt with a sailor that was, in an accident. Now he's claustrophobic. Even sitting in a cubicle is claustrophobic for him. But you wouldn't know it unless, but every individual is a little different on what triggers them in that particular field. It's not just a loud noise, but it can be, but.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, piggybacking on that, 4th of July is coming up. God, that sucks.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really does.
So
Think about that for a moment.
Yeah, be
like that's so insane.
Neighbors need to be mindful that as a neighbors, yes.
Same thing, 4th of July and in New Year's as well. And I don't know. I think what's most annoying is that like oh, okay, I guess my neighbors want to wish me a happy 2:30 p.m. December 31st, stuff like that. Like, at least do it at night, I guess. But I don't know. Yeah, that's just yeah, that sucks. I hate that. I wish people would be a little bit more mindful. But again, I do my best. Because I understand, tradition and everything else. But I do. I really wish that. Be a little bit more mindful, I guess. But.
Yeah, of course. And when I said insane, I don't mean crazy. I think what I mean more is like again, something that I never thought about, and like it's these kind of things that really like impact you and make you really think like what's going on out there. But I want to thank you both for being here, Sean and Leo. You guys are amazing, and I loved hearing your story. I love hearing your perspective on PTSD. As we close out, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for watching. Thanks for making it all the way through. Please make sure to like, subscribe, share the podcast wherever you can. Don't forget, we have our gala, our fundraising gala coming up. The link for all that information is going to be in the description. Please check it out so you can support us and find ways to support us financially. What am I missing? Yeah. So I want to give you this space right now to share any resources, anything from you specifically that you want to share for the audiences, maybe where you work, how they can contact you and stuff like that if they wish to utilize your services. So please.
Yeah, if you if you or anyone or family here in Broward County, homeless veteran or imminently losing housing, maybe got a late notice, something like that. Please reach out to, either Mission United or myself. You can always reach me at Goodman JFS, just ask to speak to the veterans guy and stuff like that. They kind of filter everything to me. You can also, I'll put my work phone out there in my email and stuff like that.
Sure.
Reach out to me via email. It's lbingham@jfsbroward.org, and I'll go ahead and it's Lima Bravo India November Golf Hotel Alpha Mike @Juliet Foxtrot Sierra.
love that.
Bravo Romeo Oscar Whiskey Alpha Romeo Delta.org.
I love that. Sean, please share your two.
Yeah. Well, Mission United, our goal is to help, homeless veterans, those at high risk. We have 6 pillars that we try to help with: education, employment, legal aid. Primarily, our goal is housing, because we're under SSVF and HVRP. Those are grants that are given to specifically help veterans and their family get off the street. Easiest number to remember, 211. Broward 211 works very closely with us. Broward 211, just tell them they're a veteran or you're a family member of a veteran, and they'll connect you with us. Or just always remember, when in doubt, you don't know where to go or which resource, call 211, and they will connect you with the resources, connect you with this group here, connect them with us. That's what they're there for. So, that's what we're there. We're to help the veterans, our brothers and sisters, give them a hand up.
Yeah. So thank you all for watching. You guys already know to like and subscribe. For our audio listeners, thank you so much for listening. We see you, we love you, and we're very appreciative for your support. Make sure to give us that 5-star rating. It really helps to push the podcast to more places. And we will see you all next week, where we're going to have a very special guest. Won't tell you any information, but just know that this person that we have scheduled for next week has a heck of a story, which means, of course, that we're doing it again. My Story Matters. So be aware of that, because this is gonna be a good one. I'm telling you. I won't spoil anything else. Signing off. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.